Sign up for free Stratfor Intelligence. Simply enter your email address to receive 2 free reports each week.
In today's dispatch, we're going to take our viewers through the process that we use when we're evaluating an event from a tactical perspective. And in this case, we're going to look at the assassination attempt last Friday against Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Now, yesterday, we were able to obtain some pictures of the outside of the mosque and the inside of the mosque where the attack happened. And as we've looked at these pictures very closely, it's enabled us to ascertain that it was indeed an IED, improvised explosive device, used in the attack and not some sort of military munition like a mortar round or ATGM, anti-tank guided missile. What I want to do now is walk through some of the photos that we've obtained, and I want to describe the types of things that you look for as a post-blast investigator when you're looking at photos. Of course, photos are limited, and there's nothing like being an investigator on the ground where you can actually, look, smell, and experience the crime scene. But still, there's a lot that can be determined from the photos. The first photo that we obtained yesterday was a photograph of the outside of the mosque, showing the damage that had been done there. And as we started looking at this photo, one of the things that struck us is if you look at the way the blocks fell off of the building, it really appears that they were pushed outward and not some sort of impact on the outside. Indeed, when you have an impact of something like a recoilless rifle round or a missile, generally you have a smaller impact on the outside and a larger divot on the inside. So showing this, it really indicated to us that the force of the blast was coming from the inside out rather than the opposite way around. Of course, also, as you look at the window frames that are protruding from these windows, you can also see that the force of the blast was coming out and not inward into the building. This photo now is showing a view of the inside. And one of the things that immediately draws your eye is that small hole or divot in the concrete wall there. That is likely the place where the device was planted. And just from looking at the architecture of the things around there, the way the minbar was set up in the mosque, it would appear that what we had was an IED that was placed perhaps behind something and affixed to the wall somehow. One of the things to remember is that as an explosive detonates, it wants to send an equal force in all directions. And really, we see this in this picture. If you just kind of look at the pattern of the residue on the wall there, of the black soot and just the even the debris in the room, you can tell that it's basically radiating from that point on the wall. Now, of course, one of the first things that we would want to do if we were doing a post-blast investigation here is to swab that residue right there by where the hole is. And so you would swab that, keep those swabs in an airtight container, get them back to the lab. Just looking at the damage that was done and kind of the color of the black residue that we have on the walls there, it would be my guess that we had some sort of military-grade explosive involved. I would say something like a TNT, perhaps Semtex. Another thing to look at is as we see the damage, and another thing that indicates to us that it was a military explosive, is that you had a shattering or breaking of things instead of a thrusting. The commercial grade explosive, stuff like ammonium nitrate, things like dynamite blasting gels, they have a tendency to shove or thrust and push things, whereas the military grade explosive has a much higher detonation velocity and it tends to shatter things and break things rather than push them. This next photo is interesting in that it shows kind of a more distanced view of the scene of the explosive from the other side of the room. As we look at these pillars, as we look at the walls, I'm not seeing a lot of signs of intentional fragmentation like you would see in a hand grenade or a claymore mine. So likely this was just not an anti-personnel mine. It was probably a bulk charge of explosives, and it probably didn't have nuts or bolts or ball bearings added to it as shrapnel. We had received reports as well that there had been some sort of accelerant added to the charge, something like napalm or gasoline, that then burned the president and injured him that way. However, if we look at the scene, the charring that happens there, that black residue is really from the explosion itself, and that's explosive residue. As we look at the wood, not only in the minbar, but also the carpeting on the floor of the mosque, there's no indication whatsoever that we had any sort of napalm or gasoline added to the charge. Indeed, if there was any burn, it would have been basically from the heat reaction of the explosives themselves. Explosives really burn very quickly, and they do have a heat effect. And objects that are in very close contact with the explosives will oftentimes be charred, and the hot gases that come off of the explosives, especially things like military explosives, will often char and pit even hardened steels. Now, one other thing to consider is that as we look at the placement of this device, it was done by someone who knew President Saleh's routine. It was done by someone that knew the compound. Another thing to remember is that there have been hostilities going on now, really for weeks, between Saleh's supporters and his opponents and the protesters. Because of this, because of the exchange of fire that's happened and the hostilities, the guard at this presidential palace compound would have been up. This indicates to us that it's likely that this was an inside job.